Hey, brain friends. Before before I dive in, a quick heads up. Today you will hear the original Brain Friends intro. Well, actually, you'll hear that for a while. But I just wanted to give folks a heads up that you will be hearing the original Brain Friends intro. I still I need it. So I'm doing that for me, and because she is still very much so the heartbeat of this show. While I've been away, some amazing things have happened. Brain Friends now has listeners in over 90 countries. Y'all kept the show going, y'all kept sharing, y'all kept showing up, and y'all kept spreading the word, and I ask you to continue to do that. It truly does mean the world to me. I am your host, Angie Cawthorn. Welcome to Brain Friends.
Welcome to Brain Friends, where two neuro nerds talk all things aphasia, language recovery, culture, and community. I am Dr. Dictrina Celeste Gatson, a clinical speech-language pathologist and neuroscientist.
And I am Angie Cawthorn, stroke survivor and aphasia advocate.
Welcome to our show.
Welcome to Brain Friends.
We want to thank all of our listeners for downloading the podcast. We appreciate everyone listening, so please tell a friend to tell a friend that we are here.
And we are. Dr. Roy Hamilton, thank you so much for joining me on Brain Friends. To introduce yourself to the people, tell the people about what you're doing, how you've been, and what's been going on with you.
All right. Well, it is such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on Brain Friends. My name is Roy Hamilton, Dr. Roy Hamilton. I am a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. I am a professor in neurology, but also in psychiatry and in physical medicine and rehabilitation. And so I see patients who have problems with memory and also problems with language and other abilities. I try to help them have the best outcomes they can with respect to their mental abilities. I also run a lab and a center that does non-invasive brain stimulation. So electrical and magnetic stimulation of the brain. We put magnets and electrodes on people's heads and we try to make them think better. And so my main area of research in brain stimulation is in aphasia. I try to stimulate the language system in people who have had strokes or what's called progressive aphasia, and see if we can improve their language ability. So that's what I do.
Today we're going to be clearing up some big confusion. Aphasia and dementia. They are related for some people, separate for others. Those two different disorders, but they are related in some ways. We're going to discuss how they relate and where they differ. But the quick overview. Dementia is a progressive change. It goes across your thinking and eventually limits your daily life. Aphasia, on the other hand, is a language disorder that can come on suddenly after a stroke or some type of acute event. Or it can progress slowly over time. When it progresses slowly over time, that's when it's connected to PPA, which is primary progressive aphasia. But we'll get into all of that. I'm excited about all I have to share with you today. I'm even more excited for you guys to learn from Dr. Roy. He is brilliant. He won't brag about himself, so I will. He is one of the clearest teachers in our field. Babel. He is able to turn medical fog into everyday clarity. A great teacher and a great friend to the room. Let's get it. Dr. Roy.
But so I would say that the relationship between dementia and aphasia is a somewhat complicated one, but worth talking about in some detail to understand. Okay, so I think the most important first part of this is to understand what dementia is, right? And once we come up with a reasonable definition of what dementia is, then that allows us to to understand how sometimes dementia and aphasia are very separate. Sometimes they are running together. Sometimes aphasia, having had aphasia, is puts you at, depending on what the cause of your aphasia is, puts you at some degree of risk of in the future developing dementia, right? So let's start by talking about what dementia is. And one of the things that I really want to clarify is that dementia isn't just memory loss, right? So they are not synonymous. So what I want you to think of dementia as is dementia is the set of progressive neurologic conditions that cause a person to have decline in their cognitive abilities writ large, right? So not just your memory, but your cognitive abilities to the point that they prevent you from independently engaging in your normal activities of daily living. Okay? So when you have and they are progressive. So, in other words, you started out without these problems, and then over the course of time, you develop these problems. They typically go through some stage where they're pretty mild. You can kind of work around them, but over time, they get to the point where you can no longer work around them. Somebody needs to help you. And at that point, irrespective of which specific disease label we're going to put on the cause of it, whether it's Alzheimer's disease or frontotemporal dementia or vascular dementia, at that point, it is a dementia. You have a dementia level of impairment. Okay?
Okay.
So how is that different than aphasia? Well, aphasia is an acquired loss of your language and communication abilities specifically. Okay? And so and for lots of people, for example, the people who have aphasia due to stroke, uh, that that isn't exactly a progressive event, right? It wasn't like over the course of weeks and months and years. It was you were doing your thing, and then bam, now you're not doing your thing, right?
And you're not.
Right. And often for people, the course after a stroke also, in addition to being sudden, it also doesn't follow the progression that I was talking about, right? So for most people of post-stroke aphasia, they would think back and think, yes, this was worst right after the stroke. And
Right.
then over time, it's sort of been getting better. It's going to vary a lot between person to person how much better it's going to get, but it's been getting better as opposed to getting worse.
Right. Which
Okay?
is what
Yeah,
Bruce Willis has a progressive.
correct. So now let's talk about the fact that there are a fraction of people who have aphasia where their aphasia is progressive, right?
Mm.
They started out healthy, or at least they didn't note any problems with their communication. And then gradually, over time, their communication abilities got progressively weaker, right?
Right.
Those people have a progressive aphasia. And that progressive, and remember how we're going to define dementia. Dementia is a cause of cognitive change. It's progressive over time, and it gets to a point where you can't engage in your normal activities anymore. You can't work around it. So other people have to help you. So it is reasonable to think that for patients with primary progressive aphasia, they that if it gets to a point where that progressive problem in their communication and their ability to understand other people often, if it gets to a point where they can't do for themselves, they can't work around it, right? It falls into that same bucket, that bigger bucket. So it's a complicated relationship, right? Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
aphasia is a hallmark, is associated with dementia. Sometimes it is not, all right?
Right.
Because it has different causes. The other thing I'll say is that when you look under the microscope at the cells of people who have primary progressive aphasia, what you find is the same kinds of proteins, the same kinds of cellular abnormalities that you see in people who, under other circumstances with different cognitive problems, end up with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or in some cases frontotemporal dementia, right? And so it's not just that these people have a progressive course,
Right.
it's 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 that the pathology, the thing that's going on in the brain, is very similar in terms of what's happening compared to other patients who have these syndromes that we commonly associate with dementia, right? So it's a different flavor. It's sort of there's a spectrum there and a relationship. Now, I I do want to say persons who have post-stroke dementia are not necessarily totally off the hook. Okay. And the reason why you're not totally off the hook, is that one of the biggest risks for or biggest predictors for having another stroke or for having other kinds of vascular disease and vascular impairment in the brain
Mm-hmm.
is a history of having had a stroke. Okay. So
Wait, what? Say that again.
all right. So think about it this way, okay? Vascular disease, if it gets bad enough, can certainly progress to affect all sorts of different aspects of your
What is
thinking.
vascular?
Oh, thank you. Yes, um, your brain is full of, just like your body, is full of blood vessels. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
arteries and veins. Okay,
Yes.
so arteries and veins are carrying all the nutrients, the energy, the oxygen to your brain. Okay, um, when you have a stroke, what has happened is something has happened to stop that flow of energy, oxygen, and nutrients to part of your brain, right? And the bigger the area of the brain that's not getting those things to it, right? The bigger your stroke, the worse your deficits. Okay. Now, there are a variety of reasons why a person could have a stroke, but they include things like, well, if you had uh, blood clots that went to your brain, if you have uh, a collection of what people call atherosclerosis, basically, imagine the pipes getting progressively clogged,
Mm-hmm.
right,
Mm-hmm.
with gunk, and so they clog off, and then once they clog off, then nothing's getting through them, right? That's another cause for a stroke. Okay. So one thing, if you think about it, should be the case, right? That if if you've had a stroke, something's going on, right? Something
Right.
caused it.
Right.
So you can treat the stroke, you can get a person through the hospital and make sure they're alive and so on and so forth, right? And they'll have the problems they have after their stroke. But one thing you figure is, well, you had some problems with those blood vessels, and here's where I'm going to introduce that term vascular again. Vascular is just the term we use for the related to the blood vessels in your brain, right? So if I
Oh,
use that term again, now you know by virtue of the fact that we just watched you have a major event, we know there's something going on there. So that means that you are the kind of person whose brain is at risk of having more events down
susceptible.
the
Your
line.
your brain is susceptible
Right,
to.
because you proved it to us. Because
It's already happened.
it's happened, right? Right. That's what I mean when I say that one of the biggest predictors of vascular disease is having had a stroke.
Wow.
Okay. So now if vascular disease, and there are different ways to have it, some of those ways are sudden, right?
Right.
Like a big stroke. Some of those ways are more subtle. Okay. So imagine imagine the pipes, it's like a plumbing system. But the thing is, the pipes, it goes from big pipes to smaller pipes to even smaller pipes to get all the little areas of brain. Okay. When you get down to the smallest pipes, sometimes those can close off or have damage to them and not do their job very well. And it's happening a little bit at a time.
Mm.
It's so little that you don't notice. Okay. From day to day, you don't notice, but it kind of collects, right? So it is possible that over time, a person who has vascular disease, is a person who's likely to develop problems with the blood vessels of their brain, that they too can get a kind of progressive problem with their cognition. We call vascular cognitive impairment or vascular dementia. Right? And it can happen a couple of ways. Sometimes it happens because you've had a stroke, and so you're humming along, and then you get one set of problems, and you're humming along, and you get another stroke, new set of problems. Well, eventually, if you have enough of those problems, you're going to get to a point where you're not going to be able to function
and your brain is misfiring.
Right.
Things are just misfiring at that point.
Yeah, or it could happen very gradually. Like those two things can both happen with vascular disease, and they're not mutually exclusive either. They can both happen, right? So I will say that while the typical course for a person who's had post-stroke aphasia is you're humming along, bam, you get worse, and then you get better, you are at risk down the line for having either more strokes that give you more problems, right? Or for having this sort of progressive vascular impairment because the smallest pipes are closing off and you don't notice it, right? And that's why when you see a stroke doctor after you've had your stroke, they're paying very special attention to the major things that could cause you to have either another stroke or more of this, this what I'm going to call we call it small vessel disease. Okay?
Oh.
So think of it as big vessel disease, stroke, small vessel disease, this like little closing of the pipe.
Vascular, little decline, a small little decline.
Small little ones, yeah. It's sort of like you know that that metaphor about the boiling frog?
No.
You know how you can boil a frog, like because it just changes you change the temperature a little bit.
Oh, so he doesn't even move.
Water, and the frog doesn't know that it's boiling, right? That vascular disease can sneak up on you, like the little disease, right? The little vessels closing off, so people don't realize that there's a change. Anyway, so that's why your neurologist spends so much time thinking about controlling things like your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your blood sugar, basically all the things that can make it likely that in the future you will suffer from more vascular disease, right? So as soon as you've demonstrated to the world that you have the capacity to have vascular disease, they're on you, right? They're on you like a hawk, right? Trying to make sure that you don't have your next one.
When speech changes, face droops, or one side goes weak, don't sleep it off. Treat it like a brain attack. Time opens doors. Clot busting meds. They can pull it out and spritz it, and do all kinds of stuff. But it's about you realizing your symptoms, locking in, and getting to the hospital as soon as you can. Do not take a nap. This is just a question. Which ones will cause a hemorrhagic or an ischemic? Are they seen in different type of blood vessels?
So hemorrhagic strokes. So first of all, let's break it down by percentages. All right. So if we're going to talk about aphasia due to stroke, actually, if we're just going to talk about stroke in general, roughly 85% of the time, we're talking about ischemic strokes. Okay. So we're talking about, I'm going to use the plumbing analogy, and now I'm going to use an irrigation, like lawn irrigation analogy, right? So like imagine you got a sprinkler system for a big lawn. Like I got a park outside here. It's got like a, sprinkler system.
Okay.
So over at the park over there, right, the sprinklers go on. And so 85% of the time when you have a stroke, the problem that there's a clog in one of the pipes.
Right.
And so then the water's not getting to that area of the grass. The grass starts to get yellow, die because it's not getting water, right? So that's the problem. 15% of the time it's because the pipe bursts. Right? And when the pipe bursts, well, obviously you're not getting water pressure on the other side of the pipe, right? So that's the
And there's a
problem.
lot of water
And then
somewhere.
also there's a lot of water like spilling out, damaging the damaging things, right?
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
All up on the
Okay.
heater.
Okay. So the most likely place, just to get back to your question, the most likely place for you to have one of those pipe burstings, which again, it's about 15% of the time, is when there's a difference in the pipes. Okay. What I mean by that is, remember, you got big blood vessels going up into your head, right? Like just some major highways. And it turns out that off some of those major highways, there are some pretty small, they're not the smallest,
Mm-hmm.
but they're pretty small blood vessels coming off the big ones. Okay. Yeah, yeah. And okay. All right. So let's go the road analogy this time. All right. Now let's do roads. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So you imagine that if you're on a big highway, all right, super highway, and it splits into like a couple of smaller highways, but still same, they're highways, and then like those go different places. The flow of traffic, it's not such a problem, or at least it doesn't seem like dangerous, like it would be problematic. But now imagine that coming off, I don't know, off I-95, there's like a city street. Okay, there's like a city street, little cul-de-sac with kids playing soccer out there, right? Like, right?
No
Imagine,
off ramp. No off ramp.
yeah, no off ramp, just like right on the city street. Imagine how hard it would be to make that turn.
Right.
Imagine how like many accidents there would be. Like there's a reason civil engineers do not do this, okay? So now there are going to be a few places in the brain where that's kind of the case. You got these big blood vessels, and then like right off them, little blood vessels, and they tend to go to a couple of places deep in the brain. For those taking notes and for their neuroscience classes, the basal ganglia is one of them, and the cerebellum is another one. Like a few places in the brain where you got these little vessels coming off the big ones. Okay, and that's where, especially if you have high blood pressure. Okay, so it's not just that the traffic's got to come off all of a sudden at a weird angle, but there's a lot of pressure in the system, right? Like a lot of traffic.
Right, with the
And
high blood pressure.
It's got to make that sudden turn.
That high turn.
That's where you have an accident, right? That's where the pipe's going to burst, because that's the weak link in the system. Okay, so it tends not to be in the periphery, like the tiniest blood vessels, like the very tiniest ones. They're all the way out in the boonies, and so it tends to be where the major highways have those sudden off ramps. So it's a little bit different. Build up in the pipes. That's one thing.
No, listen, pressure burst pipes. JC said it first. Okay,
That's right. And the other way, just to throw it out there, is for the clogging, right? For this, we're going to call it ischemic. For the clogging is if you have a clot, and the most common place to form a clot that you throw up into your head to clog off the pipes is your heart. So
say that again.
Yeah. No, this is important. So, an important way that you might have one of those ischemic strokes, so other 85%, okay, is that you might a blood clot might get stuck in your brain, right? But remember, it's all from the plumbing, right?
Right.
Where is this clot coming from in the plumbing? Well, it's coming from the source. It's coming from your heart often.
Right.
Okay. And the most common reason for that, by the way, just so you know, is uh is something called atrial fibrillation. I don't know if you've heard of that, but basically
AFib. I've heard of
AFib,
AFib, but
AFib,
tell
right?
me, give me a full on definition of AFib.
Okay. All right. So your heart normally has its own, it's got an electrical system in it. Okay. And that electrical system is it's it's pretty independent actually. Like it's got a kind of rhythm to it and um it's got different parts that tell it when to fire when. Okay. It's what are called atria. Sort of think of it as like top of the heart, bottom of the heart, and they're moving in coordination, and the top of the heart sends a signal down to the bottom of the heart that says like, okay, I did my job. I sort of moved my blood out down into your space. Now you do your job and you squeeze and you push it out to the body. Okay.
Right.
And so what can happen is sometimes that communication will actually not will get screwed up. And the most common way for that to happen that we're talking about is that the top of the heart stops, like, yeah, basically sort of doing its job, staying rhythmic. It basically loses its groove, and it
Mm-hmm.
just starts, like sometimes it beats and sometimes it doesn't. It's like I don't, like it would just
Right. Should have been bobbing and weaving instead of weaving and bobbing.
yeah, exactly. Right. And so when that happens, what happens is that the blood, here's another fact you have to know. Blood has got to flow. Okay?
Okay.
Like blood is this crazy amazing stuff if you think about it. I don't know if you've given it much thought.
I really haven't, but I'm here for it.
All right. So blood, it's carrying all your oxygen, right? It's carrying all your nutrients. It's carrying the most important parts of your immune system with it. It's just doing all this stuff, right? And moreover, if you ever get injured, if you get cut, what happens? Like the blood flows there, and then within minutes, it's like, okay, time to, shield up, like circle
Yeah.
the wagons, right? And
Right.
like it seals you off, right? That's an amazing property.
It really is.
It really is. But the thing is, you don't want that to happen inside your body. Well, you want it to happen like if you get a cut, you want the blood to flow, and then you want it to like just close up, right? Right?
Right.
You want the scab because you need a little space
Right.
there to keep you from other stuff getting in there, right? Perfect, great, wonderful. Thank you, blood. But if but you don't want that to happen inside the pipe. And the thing is, the thing that mainly tells blood, all right, guys, time to clot up, is when it stops moving. Like when it stops moving, it's like, oh, time to clot. And so if you lose this rhythm, right? Like what could happen is the blood could stay still for too long in certain parts of the heart. And when it
Mm-hmm.
stays still for too long, it's like, well, guess what we do when we stay still for too long? Time to clot. And so now you got this chunk of material in the
Floating
pipe
around.
system, floating around in the pipe
Wow.
system, right? And so if a big chunk of that gets up, through these super highways, some like really big blood vessels coming up your
Right.
neck.
They're flowing and they're flowing up there. So
Yeah,
they're making moves.
yeah, and your body directs a lot of blood to your brain. Okay, your brain is just the hunger, like a really hungry organ. It's like I need it all the time. Energy, oxygen, like do not stop my flow. And so the clot gets up in there and like that's it, right? And so if it gets stuck in there, then you could have a stroke, right? So like again, going with the garden hose or the irrigation analogy, like something gets stuck in the pipe can't flow, the your sprinkler doesn't turn on in that section of the grass and it dies.
And it dies. That
Yeah.
is.
So that's important. And one of the reasons why that's important and important to know that clots of blood sitting in your brain are an important cause of stroke. Okay. One of the important reasons to know that is, and this is my we're not talking about aphasia, but I'm going to do a stroke PSA right now. Okay. So that is not uh that is not something that we just sit around and say like, well, I guess there's a clot there. Well, let's see what happens, right? That if we are fast enough, if you are able to get to medical care fast enough, right? That that patch of grass isn't dead yet.
Right,
Okay.
right, right.
Okay.
What? How much time is that though? What is
Oh, it depends, but but the window keeps getting longer and longer as we invent
really?
as we invent new things. So, so it used to be you had to be there, in 3 hours. Now it's much longer than that.
Is it? I didn't know that. I was
Yeah,
expect.
because
I
they can
knew the
do a
answer
couple of
to be
things.
3 hours.
Yeah, they can do a couple of things. They can give you clot busting medication through your veins, right? So a medication that goes up in there and it's like, okay, guys, false alarm, let's break apart now. Okay. They can put it through the arteries. They can actually snake it up in there. They can put a device like a wire. Now this sounds like it's a little scary. Don't but these are paid professionals we're talking about, right? They'll actually go up through with a wire in through the blood vessels up to where the clot is and sort of like literally spritz it with the stuff that breaks up the clot. Other cases, they can take a little, basically a little, they can screw into it and pull it out. Okay. And so if you just if you start noticing a change in your speech or your face droops or your arms weak or your legs weak, right? And you're like, I'm gonna just sleep it off. I'm a little tired. I'm gonna take a nap now, right? Like you are you are robbing yourself of that very
Opportunity.
valuable window of
That
time, right?
opportunity. It is so crazy how many people have said, "Well, I didn't feel good. This happened. That happened. My face was off. My was literally off." And I went and laid down. I'm like, your face was off. What do you mean you went to go lay down?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and it's like three of the fast. How do you not,
right, right.
face, what is it? Face, arms,
Speech
speech, and
time.
time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep, and that's the time. That's the time piece, right?
Mm.
And funny thing is, people don't, they don't. I don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe there's someone who sits around and says like, "Oh, I've got crushing chest pain. I'm gonna just wait it out, see what happens." Right? Everyone. No, okay. I shouldn't say everyone. I mean, there's that person out there who'll just like try and sit it out. But a lot of people would say like, "Oh, I'm having a heart attack. Uh,
Right. This
let's
is
get
a
to the
problem.
hospital. Let's
This
figure
is
this
a
out. There's a
problem.
problem, okay? But you'd be amazed at the number of people who are like, I don't realize that I am having, and uh, I'm going to say this is the equivalent of a heart attack for the brain, right? Same basic mechanism. You're having a brain attack,
Yes.
and people don't know, right? That when you're having a brain attack, you got to get to the hospital because you're robbing yourself of the opportunity to have it reversed.
And here's the thing. I will say this. I had no, for myself, I didn't know I'd had even had a stroke. I knew something was wrong. I knew I couldn't talk, and I couldn't use my hand, but I was in very, very lucid, and I was making sure I was lucid. Like, we were like, we gotta go to the hospital. I told you the guy didn't even want to take me that night. He told me I was having a panic attack. So sometimes that happens. If I would have taken his advice,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. I'm probably tripping.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the thing. Your brain changes. Practice is the original neuroplasticity tool. Like Dr. Roy says, before they had all these things, the only thing they had was practice. We talking about practice, man.
Good. That's good. I think you said a couple of really important things here. All right. So, first thing, just to go back, I mean, you were reflecting on people who have been mistreated, right? Because it wasn't commonly understood, because uh, a lot of people don't understand what this condition is. And
Mm-hmm.
think about it this way, all right? So the global burden of stroke is about 1 in 6 people, all right, of stroke over the course of the lifespan. It's a very common condition around the world. Depending on what papers you read, the incidence of aphasia, depending on, I mean, let's be conservative, 20 to 40% of people walking out of the stroke unit, right? So let's
Mm-hmm.
split that down the middle. Let's just call it a third. I mean, that's an enormous burden, right? That's an enormous number of people who've had this condition. So
Mm-hmm.
it's it's much more than conditions for which we have names for which people are very familiar with the condition, right? There
Parkinson's.
Parkinson's disease, ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, right? I mean, uh, everyone knows those names, and yet for a condition that's far more common, we don't have a lot of awareness, right? And so I think an important thing that you're doing, that I try to do in my life, is just to raise awareness of what this condition is, right? And then the second thing I love about what you were talking about, right? You were talking about those steps. You're talking about taking those steps, right? And making progress because because it's it's really important that to understand that there there is a potential for progress, right? And that potential for progress is dependent on how much you put into it.
Right.
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 Right. It turns out that I'm a neuroplasticity neuroscientist, right? I do this brain stimulation. The whole goal of the brain stimulation is to try and make the brain more plastic, to help people have more change in their brain circuits in order to help them acquire their language abilities back, right?
Right.
After their stroke, or to hang on to their language abilities longer for people with primary progressive aphasia, for those degenerative aphasias. But uh, so that's what we do. But practice, practice is the original neuroplasticity intervention.
Yep.
Before people made machines, they stick on your head and flip on, right? Practice is how you and I and everyone on an everyday basis changes their brain, right? So if you want to change your brain with respect to language, you need practice, and I think you're a living testimony to that, right?
If you or a loved one are living with primary progressive aphasia or recovering after a recent stroke, there may be a study for you. Dr. Hamilton's team is exploring new ways the brain stimulation might help or protect or improve your language. So, when you would help somebody that has aphasia, if somebody is listening and they have aphasia and they're like, what? That's a thing? Can you tell me a little bit about, well, first of all, are you looking for participants, and are you looking for like patients if they're in the Philadelphia area?
We are looking for people who have what's called primary progressive aphasia. I alluded to it already. Think of this as people who didn't have a stroke, but instead have noticed that over time their language ability has progressively gotten worse. And specifically their language ability. We are looking for those people for a study involving electrical stimulation of the brain. We think we can stimulate the language circuits in those individuals to help them keep their language ability for as long as possible. On the other side of the fence, we are very much looking for people who have had a stroke and aphasia, and in particular, we are right now really focused on persons who have recently had a stroke. We think that if we can get in and affect people who have recently had a stroke and stimulate their brains, in this case, it's with magnetic stimulation, that we can affect the trajectory, what their future looks like with respect to their recovery, right?
Wow.
And so it's very hard to find these individuals because of, a lot's changed in your life after you've just had a stroke. And like, is it easy to come in for a research study every day for a couple weeks on end to get stimulated? Well, probably not, right? But we think we have the possibility of making a real difference in their recovery. So, I understand most people who've had stroke and aphasia who are listening to a podcast have probably had it for a minute. But if anyone knows anyone who has just had a stroke and has aphasia, we would love to help them on their
Wow.
road to recovery.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you have a way that if you can catch them, almost like the stroke buster thing with your having a stroke, if you can get to them early enough, you might be able to help them restore some of the
Yeah.
things that they lost. Help them build those roads a little bit faster.
That's right. That's right. So, the brain undergoes a lot of changes on its own, okay? After you've had an injury. And you know that's true, because if it wasn't changing after you had your stroke, you would always be as bad as when you just had your
Right,
stroke.
day
Right?
one, you would know,
Right.
right.
So it's got to be things have got to be changing up inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we think that maybe the best time to make more change is when the brain is especially prone to change in the first place. It's
It's
like, well,
already,
how is
it's
it
ready
doing
for
the
the
work?
prompt.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's why I wanted to highlight that study, that we're specifically looking for people. By the way, we're also looking for people, although we haven't had as much trouble finding people for this one. We're also looking for people who have had stroke in the past, right? So 6 months or more, so we call that chronic. But their symptoms are relatively mild. We're looking for people who, and the reason for that is that there's this whole window of persons living with stroke, where they've improved up to a certain point, but there's still a gap there that they're trying
Mm-hmm.
to cross, right? And so one of the questions we're trying to ask is, well, can we help close that distance for them?
Right,
Right? And so
right.
that's a third study, but really I especially, of all the three, I want to emphasize that what we call subacute. That's that period right after the stroke, right? The subacute stroke. If anyone knows anyone, we would love to help them.
Oh wow, that is phenomenal. And shout out to Penn Neurology, Dr. Roy, and his whole staff. They are phenomenal. And they're brain friends. Brain friends. See, this is what I'm talking about. He gets it. My man gets it. Every time Dr. Roy drops it, he doesn't just give you facts, he gives you the frame. He breaks it down in ways that makes you sit up, lean in, and actually get it. And for me, that's the mark of a true brain friend. Brain friends! So again, thank you to Dr. Roy Hamilton for joining me on this episode, and to my girl Celeste for being that whisper in my ear to continue to show up here on the mic. Brain Friends has always been about more than a podcast. It's about advocacy, understanding, and inclusion. It's about taking what feels impossible to explain and making it livable, relatable, and clear. So if today gave you something to hold on to, share it, tell a friend, drop it in your group chat, because awareness spreads when we do. And I promise you this, we'll keep showing up every episode until aphasia is no longer invisible. My name is Angie Cawthorn. Peace, y'all.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Brain Friends. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite streaming platform. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Brain Friends, the podcast. I'm so extra.